members of the Board of Governors, faculty, staff, alumni of DAICT, distinguished guests, graduating students, and of course, their relatives and parents. It's great to be here this evening, to be with you. And I'm thankful to the administration of DAICT to invite me to this August program. And the reason for that is very simple. I like to attend two specific programs. One is when you enter, the so-called the freshers program, you enter an institute. And the next one, when you graduate out of the institution. And the reason for that is that when you join an institution like DAICT, something so premier institution in the country, you come with a dream. You see that with your expectations, your aspirations, and with the dreamy eyes when I see them. At least I do that at IIT Bombay. And now, today, after 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever may be the journey through this particular institution, it's a time where you met your expectations and something, the dream with which you came in, you will be going out with your expectation fulfilled and further get refueled to do something great once you step out of this institution today. So that's the reason I love being in this one. And I, as an own graduate, I had 3 degrees, but I tell you, I could never attend any of my convocations, okay? So that's why I keep going to different places, okay? So first of all, I would like to take this occasion to congratulate all the graduates. It's an end of a journey, they call it, but to me, as a new beginning. And also to your family members, parents, who actually are equally dreamy about your career ahead. And of course, not to mention the 2 years that you were there, okay, which is a tough time in between, to be with you, provide you all the kind of support that you probably needed. Some of you might have done the courses from home, right? So all those are over. There's a look ahead. There's a new life, okay? And we are all here under the open sky, okay, not wearing any mask, okay? So that's what we have. Now, when you come to the convocation address, normally, they call it chief guest, you're supposed to talk on some specific topic, right? Now the question is what to talk on, right? Now here is a person, okay, who has never gone out of the classrooms or others, right? All my life I have been in some universities, wherever it is, okay, never. We have my very dear friend, Dr. Aloknath Dey, and he has never come to the classroom. He was always somewhere else and, doing on companies. So completely very different job. So I was thinking that as a person in academia, okay, that includes teaching, research, and administration also. And while doing that, having lost most of my hairs, okay, during there, and it was all I was doing sitting in the chair. So what all I can talk, okay? There is nothing much other than education, right? So I'm going to talk something about education and mostly on the higher education. But before that, I would like to go back a little bit in the history to see this, how it evolved, to get a perspective on education. India, all of you know that our learning in those ancient times started with Gurukulas, right? And if you go somewhere in Greek and others, these places also they have, the schools of Plato and others, those, all these things where all these students, that's also like a kind of a gurukul there. Now, I feel personally, that's my opinion, that kind of education got a change long time ago when there was a person, you might have heard the name. His name was Uddalaka, Aruni Uddalaka in Chandogya Upanishad. If you read, his son name is Shetkatu, right? You might have heard the name. So there is a person, he goes as natural to some teacher, guru, those days, came back home saying, I learned everything, 12 years, all studies done, I got my degree from your DAIICT director, all done, right? And then he gets a question from his father, none other than the father was also great, educationist in today's term, okay? And asked the question, do you know that particular knowledge? If you know that, you know everything. Of course, that's a very fundamental question in Indian philosophy. So I'll not go into that, but take a cue from there to say that when you actually ask the question, this person, Shetketu, had no answer. That means there was a certain part of learning was incomplete. And when it was incomplete, it requires that he goes to another guru. That means one guru is not enough. So you have multiplicity of gurus required. And that's how we have universities and others where there's a lot of professors. We have so many of them sitting on that side, right? They all are those, and you form a system where you take knowledge not just from one, because that may not be always enough. Take it from all. And that's how you develop this kind of learning system, whether it's Taxila to Nalanda to Bologna and go for wherever it is. That gets, with time, it gets changed. But that's the beginning. And now I go to the next part of that. Who pays for education? What is the cost of education? Now, immediately most people say, oh, I stayed with a guru or some of them, I never had to pay anything, right? As if education is free. No. You have to again look at it. The person had to stay with the guru, do all the household chores, everything, do the cultivation, whatever it is. You put in all your efforts. Like today, if you have to do somewhere, you would get paid for that also, right? Maybe in some cases we say TSE or whatever, right? But you get it paid. So you are putting in, so it does cost, because whoever is the person being guru or teacher has to have his own life. There is a cost associated with it. And it's not cheap. You're putting in your entire salary, which was in a barter system those days, you give it up. Now, if you look at that, okay, then today, when you say that education has to be very cheap, I don't agree with that. There has to be some kind of sustainable model where there are teachers, there are other supporting staff, you have a building, everything has to be paid. And people sometimes don't understand that, okay? So this is a requirement. And now if you look at that, we have people who are in economics. Whenever you have money circulation, that means there is some way of livelihood. You talk about an economic activity, so that means money could be made out of it also. And if you look at certain countries, like in Australia, I think the biggest revenue, I think the second most revenue that comes from them is actually from higher education by taking students from all over the world. So basically you have like an economic activity for that. And similar thing happens in, like let's say in US, when you pay large amount of money, when you actually pay for it, right? So it becomes like an ecosystem. And as a matter of fact, if you go to any Western country, typically you say that, like normally we fraction of your working population is in a particular industry, right? So if you say the academic industry, education industry, okay, like in India, 40% of the people are in agriculture, right? So what is the percentage of the people who live based on educational activity? Now it's around 3 to 4%, okay? Not very low. And if you go to Western countries, some of them, it could be like 7%, okay? So there is also a way of using this for mobilizing the country's economy. So you should look at that also, right? So this has to be looked at that. And of course, now when you come to a country like ours, right? Yes, we had the Republic Day, right, yesterday. And it's a republic. So there are certain things which is a country responsibility. And being in India, where we have a very large number of young population, we talk about demographic dividend. Now this particular dividend, you will get it provided the company works well. And what is that? Our young people are trained well, they can actually man the industry, they can create jobs, whatever is required. Now that's what the investment is required from the government, from the other private sector, and to do it together to see that we get a societal upliftment. As of today, in India, in higher education, the gross enrollment ratio is about 25%, okay, something like that. But in other countries, it's much higher, okay? But I think our national goal is that by 2030 or so, you have to raise it to 50% to actually derive that demographic dividend. So we'll have to work from that aspect. So I'm trying to give you like a picture on how to draw your canvas, and where the canvas is nothing but as an educational activity. Now, it's good to say that way, but what are the challenges, like when you talk about that? Now, of course, in India particularly, when you talk about that, and several other countries, it's actually, one of them is the quality. The quality of education, unless you are able to guarantee that, then you put somebody for 3 years, 4 years, it doesn't fetch you anything, because the dividend that I talked about, you cannot get that. Because sometimes we say that we produce people. We have degree minting, operations, but these people, sometimes the industry says they are not employable. You hear these terms, okay? And similarly, the other thing that you require is that when the things change, right? So it's not only the education that is today, but the education has to be at a level so that tomorrow you can reinvent yourself, you can reskill, okay? And that's how actually it's supposed to evolve. Now, for example, what I learned in my own, let's say college days, to what we do, and most of us, you ask all your professors, it's not always the same. It changes. The area changes. When we were there, we never heard of something like machine learning. Okay? Now everybody talks about machine learning, artificial intelligence, right? So how do you do that? Right? There has to be a process by which, like, I cannot say that, oh, we don't know, so I don't have to do it, I never learned, I will not teach anybody. Because time will change, the needs changes, right? So we, as a faculty, not only have to guarantee that the quality of education that you get is best one, is reliable, is sound, okay? Now, also, it requires practical skill set development. So we have to develop that, because we are talking about engineering education. So when you do it, you are expected to bring in certain technological development that uplifts or make the life simpler for the common people, right? That's the job of engineers, the technologists. Use science for the benefit of people so that everybody gets a benefit of this new thing that you are doing. Now, of course, India has another issue, the scaling. the scale-up operation. It's a huge country with so much of diversity. And if you leave anybody out, okay, what you actually do, you are losing them out. And they are not productive in the way the nation wants to be. Forget about unemployment and others, because your nation needs them, right? See, unemployment and others is relevant to that particular individual, but I am talking about the society as a whole. If I leave some portion of our society not being productive, the society as a whole ends up losing. And that's something that we should look at it when we come from the top, saying that people have to be trained properly. We have to do it at a scale. Now, how do you do the scaling? Now, in engineering, most cases you talk about efficiency. What is, all kind of things, what is the efficiency of a motor or something like this. So how do you define it? Is there any way we can say that? So maybe I can come up with a measure that how well we are doing. So one possible way to do it is to say that when you graduate, how many students you graduate per faculty per year, okay? So let's say for DAICT, which is one of the very well-known institutions here, you're privileged to be here. So we have something around 600, 700 odd graduates this year, okay? And let's say you have 70 faculty members, right? So how many you are graduating in that particular year? So you are graduating 10, okay, per particular, 10 students. Of course, some of them have different life cycles. Some of you have 4 years, some of them 2 years, some of them, whatever, 5 years as a PhD, whatever. So you have a certain number. Can we increase that? Right? More you increase, it becomes cost efficient. Remember, we talked about education also involves cost. So when you try to do that, then the question is that I can always try to put more. Like, for example, people say, why not I do MOOCs or go like an online education system where there could be 1,000 students taking my lecture? Sounds good. But you have to also maintain the quality, the touch, the individual touch. Do I know whether, what I teach, do you understand? Okay. Do you have the eye contact with the students? These are important. And for you as a student, when you do it, you want to be along with your friends, discussing topics. There are lateral learning. So if I just be online at my home, which you did during this COVID time, you are forced to do it. That's not what you are there, because these are the people, I saw some of them doing startups and others. You need peers who is going to help you getting connected to the right set of people. So peer process, generation process happens because you are together. But at the same time, I have to increase so that imparting education becomes cost efficient. So that's kind of a requirement. It's a staff. And the other thing that we find today is one thing that's really challenging today is there is a great amount of depression among the students and others. There could be various reasons. Psychiatrists and others that go through that. But what has happened is that, in my opinion, that you are aspirational, and sometimes there is a disconnect. And when you have a disconnect, and particularly when you scale it up, okay, you are likely to lose the focus, and the disenchantment sets in. And if that happens, then I can also quote, like your director quoted, something from Tagore. So I can take the same thing, okay? In Bengal, coming from Bengal, to us, I think there is no topic where Tagore has not written anything about, okay? So almost everything is covered. I think the party has begun, looks like, okay? So good. So there is a saying that, porke korile apon bondhu. So which means that those who are distant, you make them your near friends. right? How do you do it? Social media, Instagram, Facebook, right? And of course, Tagore goes in a slightly different way, that's in a good sense, but if you may allow to add the next line to that, from my part, then I would say also in Bengali that aponare korile por means you make those who are closer to you, okay, they were closer to you, you make them a distant one because you don't talk to them, right? So this is a social disconnect that we see among the students, right? Because you are more comfortable talking to somebody over, like a social media than your next door somebody who is staying in the same dorm. Now that's a big challenge, and I tell you, it's not only from in India or anywhere. Even in US, I am told 25% of the students are suffering from this problem, okay? India, we don't know the real number, but it is maybe at least 10%, I would say. So it's significant. So it's also a great loss for us, and we'll have to ensure that the proper education it come in, okay? And this, sometimes in my personal opinion, it happens, is that today's youth, unlike when we were students, is a lot more aspirational. You know, the day you join, you probably know what you want to do in life, okay? And when you want to do that, you want to fly immediately, okay? I think, Professor Dasgupta said that go to the sky, the sky, that's what, sky is the limit we talk about. You keep flying high, like a stars. But you do it, of course, that's great. But what you also have to do is that you have to put your feet firmly on ground, right? The reason I say that, if you don't, then of course, when you try to do it, you come from all these good places, and then suddenly you come to this premier institution like DAICT, and then there is a competition. Of course, somebody will get more marks than somebody will less, and also sometimes you're not as successful as you wanted to be. You fall really hard. And when you fall hard, getting back is very difficult. So the way to take failure in this aspirational case, sometimes we are hurting ourselves. So my request would be that, of course, there would be opportunities, and there would be always case where there would be difficulties, but you have to take the difficult time with a proper stride. If you don't, at some point there could be hard fall, and it's very difficult to rebound, okay? Now, if you also, we talked about education. So what is the way forward? We talked about challenges, right? Today you graduate, and of course, you are already, maybe some of you are in a job, but you look at the time that you are in, okay? We are post-COVID, right? And at the same time, there is a very interesting time that there is a global recessionary tendency, right? And that could be for whether it's a pandemic, or it could be the Eurasian war, okay? There could be several reasons, but the fact remains that this, there is a problem. And you might be hearing, as a matter of fact, just now I was reading something and says that somebody for a big company, tech company, was hiring, okay, and actually the person was trying to interview somebody, and at the time of interview, the person who was doing the interview, he himself got fired, okay? So I don't know what happened, the interviewee got selected or not, I have no idea, at least I could not see it there, but the person who was interviewing, he got fired, okay? Now, if you look at this time of, the difficult time all over the world, actually in India, it's not happening that way. It's the other way, because we still have an economic upswing. You will see that still, we are growing much better than most of the countries, right? So can we take as an opportunity Now, if you have to take an opportunity, and now we are talking about in a global position, we are not talking about only in India, because, it's very interesting. If you know that, if you are not using, somebody told me that is a neurologist, that if you are not using part of the brain, for some reason, I'm not thinking or then something else occupies that space, okay, in your brain, some other faculty. So similarly, you have to do it here. Now there is a void. Now can we collectively, and the DAICT graduates, I include them, to take up the challenge, okay, and we take it as an opportunity to see that we can actually go in and use the opportunity to improve whatever our technical prowess that you have developed here to serve the country, create jobs, create wealth for the nation. And I think that will be a wonderful opportunity. You should not miss the bus, okay? So that's the time that we are talking about. Another thing is also, which is very relevant here, is the entrepreneurial opportunity. This is a time, I think you might have heard that even I think almost every week we are, turning on one of the unicorns. So the question is, now also, some of them are of course service and others, but nonetheless they are all unicorns. Can you also do DAIICT and other unicorns that are coming out? So if you can involve yourself, you have great peers. There will be mentors, there will be seniors, others. And can you get into that? It's not that everybody has to be entrepreneur, but there are some of you have to take it up, okay? Because of that, you can actually create this kind of wealth, job, the prosperity that the nation demands, okay? So I think for that also, there is a great opportunity, because if you notice that for the last few years, there have been, very nice governmental initiatives like your Make in India, similarly like Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? In that particular case, you have a certain opportunity that gets created, which actually gets somehow reared by different provisions of the government regulations. So I think we should be able to leverage that. Now coming back to, also is a time that chief guest is supposed to give you an advice, okay, at this time as you graduate. The question is, what advice to give you, okay? And if you have heard how when I was introduced, not about other thing, but what area I talk on, where I worked, there's computer vision image processing, right? So I could tell you one thing, that sharpen your observation power. For engineering, personally I feel that 50% of the job is done if you observe it carefully. Spend some time in seeing what is happening. Observe very carefully. Now you may say that I'm talking like, Sherlock Holmes talking to Watson, hey Watson, did you notice this one, or something like, it's very common. Every storyline they will have something like, oh, Watson misses out. Then Sherlock Holmes says, oh, this is what it is, all right? It's usually, as a matter of fact, almost all detective stories, right? But there is a lesson to learn. I think in my life as a researcher, I found that half of my job is done if I am able to observe the thing properly. So no matter what you do, I understand the problem better. I know what is happening, and probably what needs my attention, right? And that's what I would say the most important thing in my life